Hi, everyone. Welcome to Art and Talk. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Art and Talk. And today we're continuing to bring you another artist from the Cultural Council of Palm Beach County's current exhibit called The Gathering. And we are bringing you a collection of these artists. We started yesterday with our woodworker, Robert Wolfkill, and we're continuing today and next week. So stay connected with us. Let's talk a little bit about what the Gathering exhibit is about. The Gathering is looking at the ways that we gather together in our homes and in society. It's gathering together for celebrations, for impromptu events, with family, with coworkers, neighbors, and also with strangers. So all of the art centers around this theme. So our guest for today is a multidisciplinary artist, and we'll be looking at her piece. It's currently on exhibit at the Gathering and looking at a selection of her other work as well. So again, thank you so much for being with us today. And let's go ahead and welcome our guest for today, Sarah Huang. Sarah, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Leslie Sue.
Oh, it's awesome to have you here. All right. So, do you want to give us a little bit of a background and how you got involved in the arts and what's attracted to you? I know you have a BFA in art. So, has art always been a part of your life, or did it like develop at a certain point?
Yeah, I would say that ever since I was little, art has been a constant part of my life. My mom is an artist, so naturally, that's kind of like what she would expose us to. Anytime we went out, like with family, museums, galleries, they were always involved. So I got to see a lot growing up, and it's always been interesting to me. But I never expected to pursue it professionally or as a career. It was just something that I just really enjoyed doing. As a kid, I was very much into comic books and illustration, still am now, but I really wanted to get into animation, even like just so comic books, animation, that kind of stuff was what I was really into as a kid. But as I got older and I started exploring other, I guess, disciplines within the visual arts, like I actually wasn't even a art major when I started college. I went to FAU um, here in Boca. So what I actually started studying was communications. I was doing the film, video, and new media major. And there was just something that I had to take a couple of electives. So of course I was like, oh, I'm going to take a figure drawing class. This will be really cool. And that figure drawing class changed it all for me. I was like, this is totally what I need to be doing with myself. So in my second year of college, I switched majors to visual arts, got into the BFA program, and then that's just really what got me started. I graduated FAU with my Bachelor of Fine Arts in painting in 2015. And then after that, I started working on, I had various jobs, not necessarily related to the arts for the first couple of years. So it gave me plenty of time to still pursue my work outside, like my artwork outside of work, so to speak. So I was still exhibiting, still really finding my voice and really finding the subjects and imagery that I wanted to convey in my work. And then I would say for 3 years, then I worked as a director of operations for a local arts nonprofit. So I got a lot of arts administration experience there. I worked with a lot of artists, both musical, visual, but again, I was still really, really pushing to pursue my work outside of that because I knew at some point I'd really like to be working as a working artist. And now I'm actually currently I am a working artist, and I'm a artist in residence at Arts Warehouse in Delray Beach.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the short story of all of it.
Mhm. Oh, that's just amazing involvement. So you initially, when you were quite young, there was like definitely an aptitude and an interest in it, and
Hmm.
then you kind of pursue this communications. And then I love that the life drawing class, that was the hallmark moment where you were like,
Yeah,
oh,
it was it was crazy. I just like something clicked. Like that first class, we had the model come in. I sat down like with my easel, and I was like, yeah. I need to be doing this. And I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened, but I'm glad it did. Whatever it was, I'm glad it did.
Mhm. And I love how you seem to have this very, like kind of like overview of what's going on. Like you're immersed in it, but yet you're kind of stepping back and kind of like letting it all happen. Because you were saying that, some of your jobs, were not initially in the arts. And
Correct.
but yet you were saying that that really helped you to kind of find your voice. So you kind of allowed that time to kind of like put you like almost like in an incubator, or kind of like help you to get your voice and how you were going to express yourself in your art and its meaning.
Absolutely. That's exactly how I felt.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the piece that's currently on exhibit at the gathering. How did all that take place, and tell us about the piece itself?
Sure. So a little background. I was asked to, so I had met Jessica through, I guess it was, I submitted to be in the artist directory. And then I actually was interviewed by the Cultural Council. I'm in the current fall issue of Art and Culture. I'm the finale in the back, talking about one of my pieces. And so Jessica was like, hey, this type of work, this illustrations, work would look great in our upcoming show. And I was trying to think about, the concept, so gatherings. And it just so happened that I had a bachelorette party that I attended several months ago with a bunch of amazing ladies. It was really an amazing time. And so I figured, how perfect is that for a show like this about gatherings? And a lot of these girls, like, I either haven't met before or, I hadn't seen in a very long time. And it was like this well needed, fun time, after the pandemic and quarantine and everyone being so distant and not really connecting with people like it, in person, like a lot of Zoom, a lot of FaceTime. Just getting to know all of these important people, to one of my friends who's getting married, was just such a great experience. A lot of us came in as very like strangers, and we left with this amazing connection. We went on a rock climbing excursion. We made dinner together. Like, I just left it with such great feelings, and I'm like, that's really what these gatherings are about, is like reconnecting and you know sharing this like human experience. Just like, I don't know, I felt this connectedness with these women, and even though I'm not depicted in the drawing itself, I just have such precious memories tied to it. And so that's what really drew me to capture them all together for the show.
Mhm. Let's go ahead and pull that image up and we'll take a look. All right.
All right.
So tell us a little bit more. So this is a digital art piece.
Mm-hmm. So it's a digital art piece. I did it in Procreate. If anyone's familiar with that, it's a great drawing illustration app that you can get on the iPad. So this actually I kind of strung together from several photos that we took. So it did take some like piecing together, because not everyone is actually where they are, like how I drew them. I kind of had to make sure it all fit compositionally together. But I really just wanted, like, again, I just really wanted to capture the fun and the joy of a gathering like this, something that's very celebratory. Um, Women from all different walks of life that, again, we hadn't really known each other beforehand, but just like the fact that they're all together, this one place, celebrating a mutually loved person in a time old tradition, is just, I don't know, there's something about it that really made it special and magical. So when I was making this, I just tried to make it, you know, make sure that the women were still captured like in their essence, but I also wanted to make sure that it had some playfulness to it. Like there was this blow up ghost balloon that we really, because it was like witch themed. It was like October, like, fall themed. So I wanted to keep this like air of playfulness to it too. But that, I would say, that's at its core, it's fun, it's magical, it's special. And it was a lot of fun to make.
Mhm. Yeah, and you definitely captured that sense of like togetherness, of fun, the bachelorette party and that whole theme of joy and celebration.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also, Sarah, I was looking at some of your other illustrations, and they all seem to have this very like beautiful, like light-hearted, whimsical feel. Is that something that just kind of comes out? Do you kind of just, want that to be there? Is it just tell us about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really consider my illustrations are so vastly different from my fine art that I work on. Like my fine art's very like visceral, it can be like really surreal and not very representational at all. But when I get to do illustrations, I just feel compelled to capture these people like as joy as they are. I always ask for like even when I'm drawing a family or a family friend or their pet, I'm always asking for so many reference images because what I really want to capture is like their essence. Like I'm like this is an important person or pet to them, like I want to make sure I kind of do their character justice. And I would say that I've done this. I feel like there's always been like a whimsy to my illustrations for as long as I can remember. I would give them out as gifts. I would make like greeting cards out of them. Um, just anything to kind of like immortalize the person as I see them through as many like images. Like it's kind of funny because I'll sit on social media and I'll just like flip through like dozens and dozens of photos so that I can really get a feel for them. So yeah, I would say that whimsy, that playfulness, a light-hearted air to it is definitely something I try to keep in mind because for me it keeps it very separate. Like I can have a lot of fun with this. This is really like objective and like how the person is and how I see them so that there's like a separation between what I'm like what I'm workshopping like in the studio versus like this is a gift. This is something that I'm, imparting onto my friends, family or their loved ones, to kind of remember an occasion or remember how they were or something like that. That's kind of how I see it.
Mhm. So these are primarily gifts that you give, these illustrations and or in like the
Hmm.
pet commissions and whatnot.
Yes,
Mhm.
primarily.
And it sounded like you kind of tapped into your creative process, Sarah. So you have your a photograph of them, and then you kind of, and as you mentioned, you look at several of them, and you really want to get the essence of them,
Yeah.
and then you go ahead and then you start the illustration. Is there anything else about your creative process with these illustrations, whether they're people or pets, that you could share with us?
That's a good question. These are great questions. I would say I'm just such an empirical person. I always have to do research, no matter what. Even if I'm doing an abstract piece, I do so much visual research before I even start sketching. Um, so I would say pretty much as I described it is really how I start. I also do some with commissioning. If someone's commissioning work for me, like an illustration like this, I do ask a lot of follow-up questions. Like sometimes down to color palette. Sometimes it just comes to like down to um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like I don't know, follow up question like how did you feel in that moment? It just really depends. But I think my main preparation, my main method is really just visually. How do I capture this person? What makes this person look like how they do? And that's really there's not much more to it. I do a lot more figuring it out like while I'm sketching and figuring out the composition or um, how fun I want to make it for them, depending on the person. So,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Let's go ahead and let's pull up some more of your art and really kind of get a broad view of all the different types of art that you create. So let's go ahead and we'll pull a few more up. Okay.
okay, cool. So, last year during the pandemic, I was commissioned by a friend to paint a wildflower mural in her backyard.
Mhm.
She has this detached garage, and she's like, I really would like to see wildflowers. And so I did some, conceptualizing. I talked to her. I'm like, let's think of something really graphic because now she has two young daughters. So one of the things we really considered when I was going into this was the color palette, keeping it pretty simple but bold. And then the other thing that we considered was like, how is this going to be like the backdrop of these countless memories with her children, you know? And she wants to really expose both of her kids, and her family really to like as much art as possible. So, um, it was that's really what it came down to, is like, I really want something beautiful for my backyard. We're a growing family. We're here. We're not going anywhere. We want one of your murals. So I worked on this for a few weeks, with her help too. She helped me out in a couple of parts of it. Um, but yeah, so it was really just so that she could enliven her backyard with something bold and graphic and beautiful.
Mhm.
And it's really great because one of our mutual friends has done multiple photo shoots of her daughter and her family back here with the mural. And it's become this really just amazing backdrop for the story of her children's lives. Like it's real, I don't know, it's just really special. That's kind of how I see it.
Mhm.
But this started out with some research, gauging what her visual interest was, um, in terms of like how the flowers might look. I looked at other like similar types of designs and murals to kind of help piece it together. And then I did a couple of mock-ups, and this one was the one she decided to go with.
I think it's so beautiful, Sarah. And the color palette, I love it. And even though it has representational aspects, you still get a feel and dive into your love of abstract as well.
Yes, yeah, I agree. It was a good marriage. It really was.
Now, had you done a mural before this?
I had done some collaborative murals with other artists in the area, a couple times when I was still a student at FAU, and then I did another project with a couple of former peers of mine in Fort Lauderdale for a project that ArtServe and Shangri-La Collective did. It was called the Open Canvas Project. Unfortunately, the building is no longer there, but that was probably, I would say, like 3 or 4 years ago. So I hadn't done a mural first by myself, or in a bit amount of time, for a while. So this was like my first one, and it's really kind of started to make me think more about pursuing that more and finding other clients who want backdrops like this for their family.
Mhm.
Um, I did another mural. I should have sent you a picture of that too, but I did do a bathroom mural for a local school called Space of Mind. They're also located in Delray Beach, and it's also very floral. It has like a lot of natural herbs and things like
Mhm.
plants, medicinal plants
Mhm.
like that, because I wanted it to have like an educational aspect to it. So those are the two that I've done most recently.
Mhm. Yeah. And Sarah, working this large scale, even though you had worked on murals, as you were saying, collaboratively before, but now taking it on as your own project, how did that go? Were there any challenges that you had to overcome? What was the actual experience, working on this scale?
That's a great question. I say there's always challenges. Your mock-up is, in my opinion, is never how it doesn't always translate. So there were definitely things that me and the client had to work out, especially because I had her helping me. She wanted to have some hand in assisting with this piece. So I would say just scaling and just like pinpointing where everything goes was probably the main issue. Sometimes I would underestimate like how big something was versus like, or how small it was, and then we'd have to blow it up and kind of like extend it out. But what's nice about a building like this is there's some like reference points. So I knew like the point of the flower had to end at the top of the rack next to the windowsill. But especially with anything, there could be scaling issues. Fortunately, we didn't have I didn't have any other issues beyond that. Everything probably, it just wrapped up really nicely. The biggest issue really was scaling, and I think really can happen with anything, and you just have to be, resourceful, work it through, figure it out. I mean, that's art, just figuring it out,
Mhm.
making it work.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to the next one.
Okay. So this is a piece titled In Pieces. I did it during the quarantine last year, and I was asked to submit a work to a show that my previous employer was doing, their Arts Garage. And so this was the piece I came up with. It's a self-portrait. It's actually the piece that's featured in the Cultural Council's magazine, Art and Culture, this season. So if you want to learn more, even more about it, you can read you can read my interview that I did with them about it. But it's a self-portrait. I wanted to kind of take a step back instead of like, we do a lot of like planning and I have to buy all of these materials for this piece. And what I was trying to do was just use what I had. I mean, it was the quarantine, it was the pandemic. Not many places were open. And, when you're in isolation, all you really have is yourself. So that's why I was like, this is going to be a self-portrait. I'm going to be a little bit more I'm going to be introspective on this piece. And so I had this collection of drawings that I did on Mylar, which is a type of drafting film. I had all of these drawings just kind of collecting dust under one of my desks. And I was like, these poor drawings just never went anywhere. So I decided to take all these drawings, reevaluate them, cut them up, and then use them as these, logic and reasoning pieces in this painting slash drawing I was starting, which is now easily it's a mixed media collage. But what I really wanted to think about was like, all right, there are all of these drawings that they didn't quite meet their potential. What am I going to do? So that by doing this and collaging them in and figuring out where they fit in the context of like the pandemic and all the social issues that were going on at the time of the summer of the pandemic, I was like, it really makes you feel fragmented. It was incredibly frenzying. It was isolating, and it impacted a lot of people's mental health, like significantly. So this piece is just a self-reflection on how I felt at that time during the pandemic, during all this social unrest, social injustice, and just breathing new life into the work that I had already started to develop in my studio. So this was a direct response to that. And it was very immediate. I don't think this took me, I didn't do like multiple iterations. Like I normally sketch and try to figure things out before I really solidify an idea. But this really just like, it just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was done, I just knew. I was like, this is me. This is how I feel right now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what I would say about that. It's for materials, that's the Mylar and drafting film on Yupo paper, which is another synthetic type of paper, and it has acryl gouache and oil bar on it. So it is mixed media.
Mm-hmm. It sounds almost, Sarah, just by the way you were explaining the whole process, and then also that it just sort of like it happened. It sounded like it was just waiting to be birthed out of you.
Yeah.
Everything that was going on with the pandemic and the isolation, and you just kind of pulled out these old drawings and put it together, and the fragmentation, and then like the thinking yet of newness. It seemed like it just, yeah, that was just like waiting to be birthed from you.
Yeah, it was really, really incredible. And I love when pieces come together like that. Like sometimes you spend all this time on a piece and you're like, no, that's not it. But this one, I was just like, this is it. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
So it holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to the next one, Sarah.
All right. So I started a series or a body of work titled Ro, which is in Mandarin the word for meat, but it also has some other um, connotations too. Like I think it can also mean like um, fleshy or fatty, like soft, like things like that. So my most recent foray into my work is exploring something on a more cultural side. One of the things that people ask me a lot is, do you feel that being Taiwanese American, Asian American, do you feel that your culture is infused into your work? Like, is it a conscious effort? Does it just happen? Like, what's your take on that? And for me, I was like, that's a great question, because I don't know if I'm like cognizant of, like, I'm not consciously making those decisions. And so with everything that's been going on, I'm like, with Asian representation, I'm like, I should be thinking more about this and really thinking about, like, does my work do this? And I would say that this series that I started, not as a conscious effort, but now I'm seeing it all to come together. I'm like, this is something I'm thinking about in terms of a cultural context. And some of my work in those time lapse videos I sent you kind of reflect that. But this piece in particular kind of kicked it all off. It is meat. So I'm just going to say that. But it's also like meat that it just exists on this liminal plane. Like, the way that I would describe it is like, we talk about what makes flesh like human or animal. And so I was thinking of it in such a way where it was like, it's in this like surreal plane. So like with this, it's not quite representational, but it's meat, it's something because of that pink fleshy color. And then you're trying to wonder like what's happening up there with like that like really um I guess like fluorescent green and that like touch of pink. So this was another one that has a place in my heart because I think it's really steered me in like a new direction. For a very long time, I've been focusing more on internal, very visceral forms. So a lot of my work prior to this one
Mhm.
has been very much like internal. So I was inspired by like intestines, stomach, like organs, bones, those types of form. But now I'm really just looking at flesh. Like, is it animal? Is it human? And I'm kind of exploring that in a new context for myself to see what that means for me.
Mhm. Which is an interesting exploration, looking at meat and then looking at flesh, and you're tying in the culture and tying in the organs and going very visceral and just what does that even mean to you, and then getting that whole abstract feel to it, and then trying to make some type of assessment visually of
Hmm.
what it means to you. And you're still kind of in that process, Sarah, of kind of like solidifying all that.
Yeah, I would say so because it is still new. This piece again was not it was kind of like it's a segue into this new work that I'm making. But the piece that I'm currently working on, that's in those time lapse videos that I sent to you, it's multiple drawings on vellum, which is historically like sheepskin, I believe, and on like graphite on vellum, and they're strung up, and they're all of these like organic, somewhat like fleshy, meaty forms. Some are more obvious, like I have drawings of duck feet, pig's feet. But I'm going back to my childhood and thinking about like the things that I saw growing up, like especially being, Asian American, like going out to like dim sum with the family and then going shopping and seeing all of these like cuts of meat out, seeing the like Peking duck in the window. I'm trying to come back to my roots a little bit. So in my latest series, um, I'm going back to drawing. I'm taking a little reprieve from the painting, and I'm kind of going back to my roots a little bit, just to explore and find where it's going next, because I felt that I was kind of in the same like in I was in a little bit of a creative rut. I was trying to find my new voice, because a lot of my old work I'm looking at, I'm like, is this like, this is me, but it's me from like 3 4 years ago. Who's Sarah now? So a lot of the work that I'm trying to explore now is like really thinking back to my childhood, really thinking about who I am now, thinking about that cultural context, but also like where do I go next? How do I elaborate?
Mhm.
So, and it's a really exciting place to be when you're in that discovery phase and exploration. Like, I love being able to experiment. And so that's really exciting for me.
Yeah, I love the sense of openness and the sense of exploration, and kind of going back to your voice. It's ever evolving. It's, constantly, it's
Yeah,
not like you want to kind of like continually reinvent yourself and find out new parts of you and then express those visually.
absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly.
You know what? Let's go ahead and pull up the time lapse and take a look at these current projects. Give me
Sure.
a second. Okay.
I can't think. What am I supposed to What am I supposed to do? Yeah. I can't. What am I supposed to do?
Love
All
that.
right. So that was the piece I was just describing. That's when it was in its early stages. It's pretty much almost done now. But it's that stark difference. Like if you look at the work that was presented here, it's very like highly chromatic, it's painting primarily. This is really it's earthen. It's like it's graphite on vellum. It's got like the vellum has this great translucency to it, but it's not completely see-through. So there's a lot of potential there to play with like light and shadow. And so even though these are all individual drawings that I'm doing, it's one piece. So it will be probably a little hung up a little bit higher with all the pieces at varying heights. And what's great about it, you can't really see it too much in the video, but when I'm there just sitting in my studio, sometimes they kind of do this like they turn on their own, like they kind of take on this life of its own and have this great sound to it. I just like hope I can maybe next time capture that somehow. This like again, it's like almost the whimsy part of it, whimsical part of it. So I don't have it's a working title, but it's what I've realized, especially coming back into a studio and having a workspace again, is that I really enjoy bringing painting and drawing to an installation format. So I'm hoping that the more I explore this subject matter, the more potential it will have to grow in not only just scale, but in its own series. So it's again, it's a really exciting time to be
Mhm.
exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah, the whole installation piece, we get such a great feel for you in your studio, which is always great to see an artist in process, but you really invite the viewer in to like be a part of this whole installation. And I love all the senses that you bring in. There's the movement and music, and it's suspended from the air. And now we have a little bit more idea of the theme, but you really bring us in to, ask questions as well. So you really kind of invite us in that way. And that's so wonderful.
Oh, I love thank you. Yeah, I love it. And what's even great is that I'll have passerbys come by and they'll like walk by and then they'll come back and they'll be like, and I'll be like, you can come in. And then they'll ask me questions. Or they'll be like, is that like, I thought that was like a person. I thought that was something else. It's me. Like, oh, whoa, that's weird. Like, I get so many cool reactions. And I tell people, I'm like, you can get close. You can walk around it. Like, really just interact with it. Like, for me, I love it. I love the experiential aspect of stuff like that.
Mhm. And Sarah, when you get into a theme and you're exploring it, do you automatically know that you're going to, okay, some of the pieces might be a painting per se, like you have
Mhm.
on the wall, and then some are going to be installation. Do you automatically know you're going to explore it in all these different visual representations, or does that just come through the process?
That's such a good question too. I would say that's definitely I would say when I go into starting something, I have like a list of like hopes and wants and then like a technical kind of list, like what I would need to achieve that. But I would say this current project especially was very much like I want to do an installation piece. Where do I start? And so that's where I started doing a bunch of ideas. Initially, they were going to just be paintings, and then I was like, no, let's take some chances here. But I would say a lot of the times I do have like a list of like what I would like to achieve, what technically what do I need to do. But I would say my favorite works that I've ever done are always just through urgency. Like I just made them, and they just kind of bursted out for me. Um, and I think allowing myself to like surrender to that process a little bit has made it the work more successful in that way, where I'm not like overthinking it or over prioritizing certain work over another. I'm just like, I know this has to be made. I'm going to make it right now.
Yeah.
And that's so kind of where I'm like, and I never used to really be like that. I used to be like, think a lot of things out, but now I'm like, just surrender to the process, surrender to what your idea is, and see if you can make it work. The worst that could happen is it doesn't work, and you just move on.
I think that that's such brilliant insight, Sarah, because I think a lot of artists, that kind of comes up. As you were saying, you really like to do research, you like to do the planning, you like to kind of like script things out.
Yeah.
And then you're saying that also you really want to now kind of like, it's almost like you're honoring, going back to the voice thing. It's almost like you're
Yeah.
honoring that inner voice that's saying, okay, like this is how it's going to be. We're going to, kind of be this in this moment and express it in this way. And then that's so beautiful that what you said, you just surrender to it. And that's just part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We have another time lapse. Do you want to set this one up and we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at it?
Let me see if I can find it.
I have it ready to go.
Oh, if you could do it, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
You're actually kind of painting and then you're cutting out and then you're putting them up on your studio wall.
Yes. Yes.
I'll go ahead and I'll pull it up, and if you want to share with us.
Yeah, it's short and sweet, huh? So this is another great just insight, like how I evaluate what gets made. I'll do it's a good process insight. Pretty much these are all the sketches that I've done from various visual references. I'm not so there are like two things that I look for when I'm working on this piece, right? It's what kind of animal it might be. That kind of comes into question because I'm thinking about like what's traditional for like Chinese cuisine and cooking and things like that. Um, but like what looks like visually striking, like what looks kind of interesting. So sometimes I really look at like the bone structure, the way, like I was looking at a ton of pictures of like raw duck, like just all like I have so many photos saved of it just because there's so many interesting shapes and forms that occur like in that duck that's hanging in the window. So this kind of gives a really nice visual representation of how I evaluate each piece before I draw them big on the vellum, cut and then wait till they dry, cut them out, and then hang them up. So I kind of like to immerse myself in it a little bit. You can kind of see there's so many things on the wall. I'll probably start out with like 20 to 25 drawings, narrow it down, maybe pick like 6 or 8, and then narrow that down to maybe like 3, where I'm like, which work for the piece? What's going to look interesting with the other parts that I've drawn that are already up there? So yeah, I just thought this was a really good insight, like how my brain and how I like to just be totally immersed in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of putting all the different pieces together. And it's absolutely fascinating hearing your evaluative process and, of course, the materials that you use and the way you're kind of finessing it and approaching your art and thinking about it. And then the evocative feeling aspect as well.
Yeah.
There's that other important aspect that's really kind of like at the heart of it from inside you, and that's kind of dictating, in a sense, you know, this whole like visual expression.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely part of it, you know, and I'm just trying to like, I'm really just looking at form at that point where I'm like, what looks, you know, what looks good, what's going to make it. And some of them I, you know, it's some of them I'll end up painting. I'll like draw them out big and I'm like, oh, this is staying the way it is. I'm not going to cut this one out. So I'll move on to the next one. So it's cool. Like for me, that helps me not like do like overwork it, like where I can really just limit myself where I'm like, you're going to only pick one out of the three of these to cut out and we'll see how it looks. So yeah, it gives me some like parameters, I guess.
Mm-hmm. You seem to have a really good balance, you know, between sort of like a logical, linear, and then also kind of free flowing, you know, like
Yeah.
unbounded kind of going on. Like you really seem to move beautifully, kind of vacillate, you know, almost like a figure eight between both of these. Do you see that?
Oh, thank you. I definitely have experienced, like, even in my last job, when I was doing operations, it really had me oscillating between being like left-brained and then like right brain. Like, cause you just never know like when the creative side reinforces like the logical side. So and I feel like, you know, that's been how my brain works like for a long time, maybe even my whole life. Because I also play music and I did like, I'm classically trained piano. I played it for like, you know, 10, 11 years, whatever it was. So I do have to like sometimes, and sometimes it's weird to like bounce between both of those because sometimes I just feel like I'm like, I want to just do creative, but my brain is like, slow down, like, you know, don't let it flow too much. So then I have to switch back, and it can be kind of like jarring, especially when you feel that extra sense of like creativity and like boundless like energy. But I think it helps keep me like in check so I don't go like too crazy.
Sarah, we need to move into wrapping the show up. This has been such a wonderful exploration of you and your art and your many aspects, and looking at the piece from the Cultural Council, the mural, you know, these whole like visceral meat theme, you know, getting back to your roots, as you have said. We'd like to offer our guests always the closing comments. So anything that you'd like to share with us to wrap up the show, and let us know how we can stay connected with you.
Absolutely. Well, I am based at Arts Warehouse in Delray Beach. We're open Wednesday through Saturday, Wednesday through Friday, 10 to 7, and then on Saturdays is 10 to 5. So if you ever want to visit, you can always send me an email or you can reach out to me on social media. My handle on Instagram is Sarah, Sarah, as in Elizabeth, Huang, Huang. And it's the same thing on Facebook too. So you can do Sarah E. Huang and I'll pop up, and you can always message me if you ever want to visit or just come on by and check out the current exhibits that are going on because we have so many amazing, hardworking artists in our space. It's really awesome.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for being our guest today on Art and Talk and sharing so much about your creative process and how you approach and think about your art and getting into all these different avenues and aspects. It's really been a great joy. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Leslie Sue. I really appreciate y'all having me on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And much success with all that you're creating and your new installation and your new direction and kind of like solidifying what this means to you.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Art and Talk. Stay connected with us as we'll be bringing you some additional artists from the Cultural Council for Palm Beach County's current exhibit, The Gathering. You can find Art and Talk on YouTube and also on Facebook and Twitter. Please stay connected with us. Thank you again for watching, and we'll talk soon on the next Art and Talk. Until then, be well and be blessed.